there was a great exchange I had with one of my many brilliant clients. This woman, she's a Momex dancer and a brilliant woman. She brought in a tape of a radio show she listened to that she thought I would find fascinating. And on the tape, it was a show interviewing a transsexual who went from female to male. And as a female, this was a master's degree college professor, late 30s, feminist, equal rights woman, very liberal, progressive woman. And she wanted to be a guy. She had been into chicks. Wanted to be a man. So goes for the sex change operation. And on the interview, which is so amazing, speaks about how as a woman, she was disgusted by the things she would see on the streets from men. The way they talked about women like they were animals, the way they whistled, or would talk about wanting to fuck, or wanting to grab their ass, or suck my cock, or almost as if they were uncaged creatures with no soul, no ethics, no morality, and no self-control. This was her experience with men. She wasn't a big fan of men, even though she was becoming one. And her own experience with women, she explained, and it's just so fascinating to listen to, was she'd see a hot woman on the New York subway. This was in New York City. And she'd get a narrative in her head about being at the beach and having a picnic, or being at a candlelit dinner, or skiing together, or going to a poetry reading, or listening to classical music and holding hands. She create this whole romantic picture in her head as a woman. And then as a man, as she started to become a man, they have to give you a large quantity of hormone shots. So she got all these hormone shots, testosterone, which then created the facial hair, and they did the operation on the groin and all this. But because of the high level of testosterone they were giving her, her personality started to change and become more manly. And she said she went through this awful, awful realization as she was becoming a man from the testosterone shots, that she'd be sitting on the subway now, and she would see a hot woman, and her legs would get wet, and she'd be scratching, and she'd be thinking, I want to rip that woman's clothes off and just devour her tits, and I just want to grab her ass and ram my fist up her crotch. And the other half of her brain is saying, what the hell's going on here? Like, what's the matter with you? And it took her months to realize that the hormone levels that she was being given were creating this mindset that she realized she had very little control over. And as a feminist and as a real women's rights activist, she had to admit to herself that yes, with a lot of men, it's beyond their control. This is not a choice to act the way they do. It took everything in her power as having a woman's consciousness to sit back and not jump every woman on the street. And she noticed how every time a woman walked by her on the sidewalk in the opposite direction, she was doing what she hated men doing, which was turning around to check out the ass. See, and she came to the overwhelming conclusion that a lot of male behavior comes from the biochemistry of having testosterone, and it made her much more tolerant of men, and also very scared for the state of the world. Now, why are we talking about that when we're discussing health and cleansing? What the fuck? Why are we talking about that? We're talking about that for the following reason. It's always great to be able to tie it together. The reason she acted the way she did is because the amount of hormones that they have to give a woman to get her to become a man, the amount of T that you take in is over the top. Brought out really well in The L Word, the show The L Word, where one of the characters transitions to a man. They give you levels of testosterone that are beyond. When you get high levels of testosterone, everything about you that is male gets accentuated. Your muscle development, your cell regeneration, also your cell death, the mitosis of cells, the splitting of cells, both the growing and the dying, accelerate. The quick bursts of violence, the aggression, everything that's yang takes off. The sexual energy, the sexual desire. The more testosterone one has, the higher it goes. So that the woman was experiencing a biochemical awareness to a different state of being. She was responding literally from a bloodstream. And in the back of her mind was like, what the hell is going on? Now, is this the normal way men are supposed to act? Of course not. And her question is, why are things set up this way? Like, it was so disturbing to her as a woman of education that this is what's going on within men. She experienced it. Well, the answer is, when testosterone levels are too high, men act in a way that is not the normal mode of conduct men were meant to act in. And the biggest way normal people raise testosterone levels is not getting hormone shots. That was a unique case where the doctors had to load her up if they were going to convert her, transition her to a man. But how does the normal population get over the top levels of testosterone? 99.9% of the male population does not take steroids. 99.99999% of the male population is not going to take testosterone for a sex change. So where is the over-the-top testosterone level coming from? And the answer is the consumption of animal proteins. And here is the connection. Meat, eggs, milk, cheese, fowl, fish, all of it. All the animal proteins will trigger the release of testosterone, the male hormone, into the bloodstream. What this does is, it makes men, since men already have testosterone, excessively male. It makes them excessively male. So what happens? Rapid cell mitosis. This is why men die quicker than women in every culture that keeps records. There is not a culture on the planet that keeps records where the women don't outlive the men. And when you look at what women put up with in modern life, the abuse, the sexism, having kids, getting beaten up, not getting paid as much, and yet they still outlive men in every culture. Why? Because the nature of testosterone is to burn out quick. Grow hard, burn out. So when we look at men eating a lot of meat, and we're speaking about sexuality, the reason the Western culture, or any heavy meat-eating culture, seems to be so perverse, especially from a woman's eyes, is because the men that they are dealing with have a level of testosterone that is far beyond what nature intended, because the diet they are on are creating monsters. Not because they don't have morals, not because they don't have ethics. And this is what the woman in the interview came to realize. She didn't understand the meat connection, but she realized it was a biochemical occurrence in men. So when we talk about cleansing and gravitating towards veganism, we also talk about lowering the level of testosterone in a man, which brings a man to a more normal, healthy place where, whether he's gay or straight, he can recognize the joy of sex, he can seek it, but at a pace and a volume that is normal. Not 4 times a day, 7 days a week, not wanting to fuck every woman or man he sees walking down the street, not having to grab or grope or cheat or spend hours on internet porn. All of that is not the degeneration of the morals of a culture. It's the excessive poisoning of the cells of a culture. It is a biochemical, physical occurrence to a population that is overwrought with meat residue in the tissue. And then you throw in all the hormones that are shot now into meat and milk cows, and you see why the hormone levels are over the top and crazy. So when we look at all the issues in the news. You look at politicians cheating, sexual harassment cases, guys beating off in the bathroom, politicians, doing shit with kids and all this nonsense, putting pictures of their dick on the internet. What's going on is the behavior is manifesting the cellular state. It is not basically manifesting the moral or the ethics of the individual. This is a biochemical response. So as we talk about getting into cleansing, we literally can reshape, if enough men do it, we can reshape the whole social structure of the country and create an ease where women can go out with no fear, where they can be out alone with no fear, where the level of violence and street crime, all violent acts come from excess testosterone in a lot of ways. The level of violence and street crime, the level of sexual perversion and, nail my balls to a piece of wood or piss on me or shit on me or put me in a scuba suit with a straw in my mouth. All this weird, sexual, stupid shit that the culture deals with would be eradicated with a mass dose of tissue cleansing. With a massive dose of tissue cleansing. And yes, people had traumas as children. Yes, people lived through things that may have twisted their psyches. But whatever trauma one lived through, if it was perpetrated by another human being, that human being's perversity came from their biochemistry. So we can always trace a lot of human suffering and inhumane treatment to the toxicity that exists in individuals. Now, when we take a close look at the normal sexual patterns of men, it's been proven over and over again. If you read The Tao of Sex and Longevity by a gentleman named Reed, I forget his first name, it's a brilliant book. If you read the great Mantak Chia, the great Thai writer about sexual energy, who wrote a book called The Inner Smile, Cultivating Male Sexual Energy, Cultivating Female Sexual Energy. If you read the I Ching, if you read any not Kung Fu, but Qigong master, or read any of the ancient texts that speak of sexuality, the great Norman Walker, which was the 1930s and 40s, the father of colonics and juicing, and they all tell you the same thing. The human male is meant to ejaculate by nature once every 35 days. It takes 35 days for the prostate and the entire reproductive system in a man to regenerate itself. When ejaculation occurs more than that, the cerebrospinal fluid is drained from the tissue and the prostate is strained. Now, if you ask the common American man, what do you think about, coming once a month? He's going to laugh in your face. And the reason he's going to laugh in your face is because with the high level of testosterone he has, that's virtually impossible. Guys get wet dreams, they end up, jerking off on a Coke machine. And again, a lot of this is not behavior coming from choice. It's biochemistry. So when we look at how often a lot of men ejaculate during the course of a week, and then we're told we're meant by nature to do it once a month, once every 35 days, we realize the high level of cellular poisoning that has so overstimulated us, and the high levels of testosterone that have so warped our cellular structure, we're literally draining our cerebrospinal fluid and we don't even know it. And that's that whole thing about masturbation makes you senile, that old stupid thing. Well, there's a little germ of truth in that. If a person's in a constant state of draining the seed, thereby draining the cerebrospinal fluid, they are going to affect their brain pattern because the lack of cerebrospinal fluid affects the thought process. So there is a germ of truth in that. Now, when a person gets into deep cleansing and gets into this whole lifestyle, they will notice, and I can tell you this, I notice it myself over the top, and I goof with a lot of my friends about this. The cleaner your cells get, the more your body feels the drainage of an ejaculation. So that when you let it fly, There's not enough money in the world that's going to want, there's no chick, there's no guy, there's no amount of cash, there's nothing that's going to put you back in the mood within 12 hours. You are tapped. That's because your body, being hormonally balanced, is aware of the limitations of the body, whereas the other people are so stimulated, they don't even realize they're ripping themselves apart. Now, this is going to get a little graphic. But what toxicity does to men, it ravages the prostate if you're ejaculating 15, 20, 30 times a month. The statistics in the United States are that over 92% of the men in this country will develop a prostate problem by the age of 50 years old. 92%. It's more than 9 out of 10. Medical science thinks that's just the way it is. It's not. It's the ravaging of the organ by excess sex, and excess meat eating. So when we cleanse the tissue, we can easily heal the prostate, which I did. My prostate was ravaged by my sickness. We can easily heal the prostate, and we can easily get ourselves to have, good, young, exciting sexual experiences on a normal basis. But one of the things required is an abstinence from ejaculation. And one of the ways you can tell a man's sexual energy, and if you're a woman listening to this, without telling the guy you're doing it, take a peek. And for guys who are into guys, take a peek. One of the ways you can tell if a man's sexual energy is in order is to check the angle of the erection. If you think back as a man to when you were 13, 14, 15, if you're standing up straight and you get a really good woody, that woody is pointing, if it's not at your chin, it's not too far away from your chin. It's creating about a 30-degree angle with your stomach, with your abdomen, right? Now, as the years pass, if a man is ejaculating all over the place, coming all over the map, you notice as he hits 38, 39, we start getting horizontal wood. When he stands up straight, the woody is coming out off the body. So if his body's up like this, the woody's out like that. It like makes an L. It may still be hard, but what that shows is the sexual energy is draining from the organism. It's going down. He's losing it. That occurs because of excess ejaculating through his life. That's why you don't see it in a young man. Most guys will kid around. When I was 13, I could hit a wall across a room when I was jerking off. Can't do that anymore. Well, that's from the excessive shots. And from this positioning of a horizontal erection, the woman is not hit correctly. Because the position that the body should be in, if the penis is upright, will hit the woman in the right spot to create an orgasm. The reason positions and all these issues are enhanced sexually for couples is because the guy's wood is horizontal. He's not hitting the woman in the right space. So it's compensated by positioning. Now, how do you fix this? If you're a 45-year-old guy and you look at yourself like, oops, horizontal wood, the first thing you do is you take 35 days and you do not ejaculate once. Not alone, not with a sheep, not with a man, not with a woman, nobody. And you get into a deep tissue cleanse, which we've explained in the other series. Juicing, fruit for lunch, salads with avocados, salads with cooked veggies, colonics, enemas, deep tissue massages, sauna. You do this for a month. You cleanse the tissue as you're abstaining from ejaculation. Watch the size of your schlong. It's going to be bigger because there's a bigger blood and oxygen flow. Watch the angle and just watch your whole sexual energy internally. And if you know that you can throw in kind of a fast from ejaculating, maybe 10 or 15 days every here and there, even as a young man, you preserve and enhance your sexual energy. And a lot of impotence, a lot of issues men have with sex in our culture, and there are a lot of 40 to 50-year-old men, when you speak to women, which I do all day in this business, that cannot function. Their functionality is shot, and that's because they've overdone it throughout their life. So the two key connections between cleansing and sex, the functioning of the man based on too many ejaculations is one, but the other one is the temperament of our culture, the fear women have, the defensiveness they have to exhibit on the street, and a fear that men could be perverse and crazy and violent. All of this could be eliminated in a perfect world if veganism were taken on and men would get into deep tissue cleaning. And if you think of the reputation vegan men have, it's always like, hey man, like, you know, people will goof with it. It's the Cheech and Chong kind of thing. You picture a hippie talking slow and being harmless without understanding why that representation exists, because when the cells are clean and open, the level of inherent violence and aggression and anger disappears. And people get more like children. They get more kind of docile. And we see that in vegan people all the time. So the whole connection between the biochemical physical world that we're talking about, it definitely pours into the social and emotional and spiritual fabric of the culture. Because if we're asking human beings to behave properly when their cells want to attack, we're not going to make a lot of progress. One other thing with this that's a biggie. This is a biggie, and whenever we talk sexuality now, the most telling issue in the culture right now in terms of the last 10 years, when you discuss anything connected to sex organs and reproduction, and I don't mean this to sound funny, even though it is, but we're going to roll with it, we're going to put it out there. When you look around, if you ask your friends, if you look at people you know, other than young women in their 20s, who usually get pregnant by accident, for people over 30, which is usually the time in modern life, especially New York life, where people want children, it's when they're over 30. In people over 30, in regards to children, fucking has gone the way of the 8-track tape. It is old, it is done. No one fucks for a kid anymore over 30. If you speak to your friends over 30, over 35, everyone needs in vitro. Everyone needs a doctor. What they call a eugenics specialist. Everybody needs somebody who does fertility. Whatever happened to fucking? The entire sterility of the country is a major, major problem. And right now in medicine, fertility doctors have passed plastic surgeons as the highest paid medical doctor. It's the most in demand. The only people, it seems, who get pregnant now through sex are the people in their early 20s who don't want the kids. But the people who are established all need fertility doctors. All of this is a byproduct of the poison of our culture, the terrible inherent nature of the diet, the hormones and chemicals that are shot into the terrible food, the drugs that raise estrogen levels in men, the chemical dumping into the reservoirs that raise estrogen levels in men, the body creams and all the different things that in certain instances can raise estrogen levels in men. Connie Chung did a brilliant special on this in the 90s. And it's a major, major issue, the volume of people who cannot have children. And all of this can be changed with clean living. If you're going to eat meats, eat organic, properly fed meats. Don't drink tap water. Don't take so many medications. Cleanse the system, and in about 3 or 4 years, the level of fertility will go way, way up. But it's getting to the point where if you can have a child over 35 years old, the normal way, this makes you like a specialist, like you've got a skill. And again, it only further comments on the deterioration of a culture through its cellular grossness, through its cellular toxicity, through its total lack of oxygen and lack of chi flowing through a clogged body, creating perverse behavior, creating an inability to do the most basic function, which is reproduce. It's a sad commentary on where we're going. So when somebody says to you, if you're into cleansing diets, if you're into eating well and all the stuff we've talked about prior, the food combinations, the order, no need to beat that up again. But if you're doing those things and some cynic says to you, which there always will be one, oh, the world is fine, you're a fanatical crazy bastard, what the hell are you doing? Look how many people are out there eating cake and cheeseburgers and they're doing great. You just point all these things out to them. The world is not doing great. It's obese, it's sterile, it's depressed, it's perverse. That's the state of a large part of the world's population. So all these rules we talk about with diet and cleansing and juicing and combinations, we always want to stress that we're talking a lot more than just I want to look good, cancer runs in my family, my mother has arthritis and I don't want it. All that stuff is fine, but it goes much deeper than that. There's a connection we have as people to each other. We have responsibilities to each other to make the world an optimum place to live. And the cleansing life can bring us there. Okay? That's it.